Okay, so normally when I do these intros, they have nothing to do with the video itself. It'll be me just doing a dance number or talking to Barry about, hey Barry, who will win in a fight, Godzilla or Jason Voorhees? Actually, you know what? That would be a good fight. I'd pay to see that. Jason is the underdog, certainly, but you just don't know. In fact, I think Robot Chicken did a sketch about that years ago. See, we're already doing it. We're already doing this. Okay, Tekking, back on track. Okay. So for today's intro, it's going to be an alternate title for the video, okay? Because usually when I title my videos, I just title them, whatever I talk about. So today we're talking about Admiral Akainu or Sakazuki's past. But the alternate title for today's video is Cold Magma, the Admiral Akainu story. Okay, cue up some sad music and crossfade. Oh yeah, look at that crossfade. Oh yeah, crossfading for days. Admiral Akainu began his days 55 years ago growing up in the North Blue Territory. He was a sad lad. He didn't really know what the future awaited for him, but he did have sneakers. Sneakers and a knife. And it was with those sneakers and his knife that he persevered until he joined the Marines at age 23. And then a bunch of other stuff happened that wasn't really relevant. Then O'Hara happened. And then a bunch of other stuff, I guess, happened that wasn't really relevant. And then he punched Ace in the chest. And then he became Fleet Admiral because of it. Finito. Absolute perfection, and I submit it to the Oscars for their consideration. Okay, so we're not supposed to like Akainu or Sakazuki, right? He's the Fleet Admiral, he's all about absolute justice, he is the one Marine out of all of them that are not on the fence when it comes to pirates, okay? Not like Kobe, not like Kuzan, not like Smoker. Smoker kind of started off like that, but he's definitely swayed his perspective on his justice. When it comes down to Akainu, he's like, no, absolute justice all the way, 100%, every day, every week, every year. Those pirates gotta pay. They fly the Jolly Roger. They're getting a magma bath from me. Akainu, do you need a Snickers? Seriously, bro, it's not that big of a deal. The gas station's right down the road. I can go pick up a Snickers for you. I can even get you two. I can get you some Snickers, and then you can sit down and eat said Snickers, and you can just chill out, and, we can have a talk about this, okay? But yeah, so that's Akainu, right? Now, there are a little bit of, complexities to his character that have arisen in the last few arcs, mostly because, after becoming the Fleet Admiral, he probably assumed that that means he would have, like, absolute power to command the Marines, but then he found out that he doesn't really, because the Gorosei are still the ones that call the shots, and maybe he thought like, well, yeah, the Gorosei might rank higher than me, but I'm the Fleet Admiral, I get to choose what to do. And no, the Gorosei probably called him into their office, probably multiple times, and are like, look, Sakazuki, you're strong, we get it, you're the Fleet Admiral, but you still listen to us, okay? And so a lot of stuff the Gorosei does behind Sakazuki's back, he gets really frustrated with. So Sakazuki is definitely, I think, coming more onto the idea that the world government is corrupted at its core, with the Gorosei, of course, being controlled by Im. Here's a question for you. How do you think Akainu would react if he found out that Im-sama was the true ruler of the world? Okay? Do you think that would change his perspective on, like, absolute justice? Or do you think it would open his mind up a little bit that, like, holy crap, if the world government, which up until this point was like the ones providing the baseline for morality essentially in the world, like pirates are evil, they need to be eliminated, all that kind of stuff the world government spouts off, and then you find out like, oh, well, it turns out the world government isn't what we thought it was. It was led by some supreme ruler, some weird ghostly figure named Im-sama who we know nothing about, that's really calling the shots from behind the scenes. Would that change Akainu's viewpoints? Now, something I did just say is that the world government is like, they're the ones that set the laws in the entire world because they're the world government, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's the origin of Akainu's absolute justice. In fact, that seems like a rather, like, flimsy kind of excuse, for Akainu to be like, I joined the Marines because the Marines say the Marines are good, In order to get the kind of philosophy that Akainu embodies, that absolute justice to, like, the maximum possible degree, to the point where Kuzan kind of talked about it, like when someone goes that far into absolute justice, it does something to you. It really warps who you are. It kind of it kind of gets you on the brink of insanity in a lot of regards. And I think that can be exemplified the best way at Ohara, where he decided to wipe out an entire ship of evacuating civilians, and he didn't even second guess it. He didn't even have a shred of guilt over that. It was just like, they say that there are criminals on that island that's about to be buster called, so we're going to evacuate. And Akainu's like, well, what if the criminals on the island get on the evacuation vessels? Well, that's just a huge oversight. Screw it. You know, attack the evacuation vessel. But sir, there's women and children and, you know, innocent civilians. Yep, can't risk it. Burn it down. You know, that kind of absolute justice really does warp a person. I also looked into this. I found this out. I completely forgot about this scene. During Punk Hazard, remember the flashback that Caesar Clown had when Vegapunk was totally the one that caused the massive disaster on Punk Hazard? There was a flashback there where Caesar was kind of arguing with his men when he was still a scientist working for the world government, and he was like, you know, Vegapunk's always talking about, you know, science for betterment and whatever, and Caesar's making his gas weaponry, and he expressly states, he's like, well, Sengoku probably wouldn't care about my gas weapons, but Admiral Akainu, he would definitely be interested in these things. He would be interested. Think about it. We make these gas weapons, and we give them to the Marines and the world government, and the pirates won't be able to stand against us, you know? Now, Akainu wasn't really there in that scene, but the way that Caesar talked about it, and knowing Akainu's character, especially before the time skip, before he became a fleet admiral, you could definitely see that. You could definitely see Akainu, out of all of the admirals, including Sengoku, the fleet admiral at the time, you could see Akainu not completely shelving that idea of Caesar making these gas weapons of mass destruction and giving them over to the Marines. Akainu would definitely be the kind of guy that's like, how many pirates can it wipe out? Is like, oh, well, it can wipe out thousands. Thousands, huh? Get that number up to the 5 digits, and then we'll talk. You know, that's kind of Akainu. He's a very serious, kind of borderline, kind of insane person when it comes to this absolute justice shit, okay? So there's more to it than just like, oh, I have an ideal of justice, so I'm gonna join the Marines. What happened in Akainu's past, all right? And we've touched upon this before in other videos about Akainu, but I really wanted to bring it to the forefront here, because eventually we're going to get a flashback with Akainu. We're probably going to get a flashback with a lot of the admirals. I really want to see specifically Akainu and Aokiji's backstory. It would be very interesting to get Kizaru's and Fuchitora's and Green Bull's and everything. It's just, I don't know if Oda's going to have enough time to showcase every single one of the admirals' backstories. Some of their backstories tend to overlap, like Kizaru and Akainu actually joined the Marines at the same year. It was about 32 years ago. Akainu was 23 at the time. Kizaru was a little bit older. Aokiji did not join until 2 years later, about 30 years ago. So there's some overlap. Like, you could see them all training together, but I want to go back even before that. I want to, because, you know, when they joined the Marines, they kind of already had their ideals of justice. You know, what happened in their past for them to adopt that kind of style of justice, right? Now, there was another video on YouTube, pretty much the only other video I saw that was talking about, like, Akainu's past, and that brought up the assumption of, like, okay, because we really don't know anything about it other than, well, this is the stuff we do know about Akainu's past. I wrote down, this is, like, everything we know about him. We know his real name is Sakazuki. We know he was raised in the North Blue. We know he's 55 years old right now. We know he's got a goatee. That's important. We know he has absolute justice that he embodies. So this is a depiction of Akainu when he was a little kid that was drawn by Oda, all right? Now, this is really not all that different from a lot of the other admirals, because if you look at Kizaru and Kuzan's over here, Aokiji's, they all kind of look like they grew up in sort of poverty, you know? They all look like they have, like, patchwork clothing. Kizaru, out of these three, probably seems like he had the best situation. He still has, like, a little patch on his cap and everything like that, but it looks like, you know, he has books, and so he had a decent education, or even if he had to educate himself, maybe taught himself how to read. But when it comes to Akainu and Aokiji, you can just tell by the way that they're depicted, they had a rough upbringing. All right, Aokiji looks like he's just, diving in dumpsters and pulling out a bunch of, like, random, like an umbrella, like a bunch of random scrap and clothing, and that's how he survived. So a lot of a popular theory is that, well, what if, Akainu growing up, his parents were, like, murdered by pirates or something, and then that set him on the path to become a Marine of absolute justice. This is gonna sound messed up, right? But just follow me on this, okay? That's not a bad backstory or anything like that. It's just, it seems like a very common one. Probably a lot of Marines in One Piece sort of had that sort of backstory where maybe a parent or a friend or a loved one or something got killed by a pirate, and that's why they decided to become Marines. Not all Marines, of course, but you can imagine in the world of One Piece where there's a lot of pirates going around burning towns down, murdering people and raiding and all that kind of stuff. Probably a lot of Marines did join the Marines for that reason. So that... I'm thinking it's even worse than that, guys. I'm thinking, like, whatever happened to him in his backstory is even worse than, like, both of his parents being murdered, like Nagato from Naruto, and that's how it, like, started his pain. I'm thinking when Oda finally gets around to explaining Akainu's past, it's gonna be one of the most messed up flashbacks in the entire story. And the reason I think he's gonna go that extreme with it, like really pushing the boundaries of what could be included in like a shonen manga, is because yes, we're supposed to like hate Akainu. We're supposed to despise him for his ideals and what he did at Ohara and what he did to Ace and everything like that. But Oda's really good at flipping that around. He's really good at taking a character that's like, okay, you think this character is just like an objective villain in this series, and that's all I'm going to do with him. No, I'm going to write a backstory for him that's going to make you feel pretty damn sad. That doesn't necessarily mean you have to forgive him and everything that he did. Absolutely not. A good example of this, weird thing to mention here, but Walking Dead spoilers. I stopped watching The Walking Dead like 3 seasons ago, but they had the season 10 finale about a month back, which featured Negan's backstory, right? And that was adapting Here's Negan from the comics. You don't have to forgive everything that Negan did. In fact, my mother and me both watched The Walking Dead kind of back when it was like really, really good. I feel like it's kind of, dipped off in the last couple of seasons. But, my mom kind of stopped watching when, Negan and what his introduction meant and what he did and who he killed. And so I'm like, hey, watch this episode, Here's Negan, because it's actually kind of interesting and it shows what he did and everything. And my mom liked the episode, but even after it, she's like, I don't care. He still killed who he killed. I'm not going to forgive him for that. It's still a very sad backstory, though. But yeah, so not forgiving what he did, not just being like, oh, okay, well, I'm okay. I'm cool with Akainu now after all that stuff that we've gotten explained. I'm cool with the fact he killed Ace now. Nothing like that. But it could be a situation where it'd be like, okay, holy shit, I understand that now. Wow. So one of the situations that I could have here, and this is something that would be really intense, the North Blue territory has always been a territory that is awash in a lot of criminal activity in One Piece. You had the Doflamingo family there, the Germa have come from the north, you have a lot of situations like that. What if Akainu was raised on an island filled with pirates, very much like the pirate paradise in the New World. Not quite to that extent, but a town ruled by criminals, pirates, that sort of ilk. What if his parents were even like that? His parents were like Frankie's parents were pirates, okay? And Akainu was the weird one in that one particular group, where he was, raised in this environment, and he got to the point where he, like, despised them. He despised his parents. He despised his family for what they were. He despised everyone that lived in this community. Sort of like Meteor City from Hunter x Hunter, that sort of reference, right? Where pretty much most people that grew up there ended up becoming pirates themselves or criminals themselves. But Akainu was the one that was like, no, I'm not going to be like you. You're the ones in the wrong here. I have to be the one for justice. Because when we see him drawn as a child, he has like the hat that he sort of like made himself. It looked like out of like a paper bag or something he found in the trash, and just took a marker and just scribbled the kanji for justice on. And he was like that, and he's holding a knife. And it's just like at a certain point, he was like, no, I don't want to live here the rest of my life. And here's another thing too. Here's the crazy thing. He grew up in the North, same as Hawkins and Drake and Law. And what's in the North on top of the Germa? The Sora Knight of the Sea comic strip that the world government would always, print in the World Economic Journal, right? So what if it's a situation where Akainu's growing up on this like ravaged island filled with like pirates, and they're reading the newspaper and everything, and they're throwing it in the trash, and then like little kid Akainu's like wants to read the comic books, and he's like reading the comic strips of Sora Knight of the Sea, and he's like, I want to be like that. And then his parents or other pirates on the island were like grabbing the newspaper out of his hands like, what are you doing reading this crap, Sora Knight of the Sea? Don't you know the Marines are out to kill us if they had a chance, Akainu? I guess he wasn't Akainu at that point. Sakazuki, don't you understand that the Marines will be out to bring us in? And we're your parents, we're your family, blood is thicker than water. All that kind of crap that might have been given to, Sakazuki in his formative years. But even despite all that, he still wanted to be a Marine. He wanted to be. Now, he became one, but it was sort of like because he was raised in that environment and he was pushing against it so damn hard, it ended up becoming the exact opposite. So whereas maybe the island he grew up on was filled with criminals to like the maximum possible degree, where it verged on like insanity and madness, Akainu also grew up in the idea of becoming a Marine, but also in that idea of absolute justice. Man, dude, it might go dark. It might go dark to the point where like Akainu might have murdered his own family as a kid or something, right? Like, I'm thinking that kind of level where we're going to get, where Akainu one day, he just, like, snaps, and he's just like, I'm done with living in this. Like, maybe when he was, like, a teenager about ready to leave, he's just like, I can't stand this anymore. And he might have taken as many people off on the island, and then he set out on his own, and then he eventually joined the Marines. And then he was just like, it doesn't matter. I lived with pirates my entire life. I know what they're all about. I don't care. Akainu might even know, like, logically, there are some pirates that are not totally evil, like the Straw Hats. Like, logically, he might know that, but it's like, you just never know what could happen, though. Because maybe that's a thing, too. Maybe that might be a twist, where, okay, Akainu's growing up in this environment with pirates, okay? What if some of the pirates were not the evil, burning, murdering pirates? What if Akainu had a friend, like his one friend or one ally on the island, that was still a pirate, but was more of like the philosophy of like the Straw Hats, or at least appeared that way, where it's just like, Sakazuki, not all pirates are necessarily pure evil. Some pirates are actually, just out for freedom in the world because of the world government and stuff. And so what if, though, that person that was sort of like, not Whitebeard, one of Akainu's like only friends growing up, what if that person ended up being really messed up? Like, what if that person later on down the line ended up like burning down a town or something, or snapped or something, and then Akainu was like, I what? My whole life is just, that's what pirates are, always, like no matter what. So Akainu might look at the Straw Hats and be like, he's like, yeah, so what? The Straw Hats don't burn down towns or don't murder anybody. There's no reports of them doing that, but that doesn't mean they can't someday. If you're a pirate, you can't even be trusted. That is the logic of absolute justice, and that is what Akainu embodies right now in the story. So I really feel like it's going to be something like really extreme like that. Something to that crazy level that led him down this path. Now, Aokiji.
Aokiji, when he first joined, did not adopt his kind of sense of moral justice that he has right now. I think his sense of justice back in the day was like blazing justice, or like burning hot justice, or something like that. We don't know what that means. It's an interesting parallel because of Aokiji's ice powers, like what exactly that meant. And then it was probably the events of like Ohara that changed his stance to, really like, oh, okay, well, we've seen what could happen when absolute justice is taken to its extremes. So that's why Aokiji adopts a more moral justice. And when it comes to Kizaru, it's unclear justice for Kizaru. God knows how Kizaru's upbringing led him to that sense of justice, what exactly happened there. But I think out of all of the admirals, and that includes Sengoku, that includes Fujitora, that includes Green Bull, out of all of them, Akainu had it the worst. Akainu had the worst kind of upbringing. We don't know when he first got his magma powers. I don't think he showcased anything like that while he was a vice admiral during Ohara. He might have had them at that point. Aokiji had them at that point. He had his ice powers, so maybe he did. It's possible that maybe it's kind of like similar to what Eneru did, where Eneru was being raised on Bilka, and then he ate the Goro Goro no Mi, and then just kind of like nuked all of his home island, and then torched it, and then left. Might have been something similar to Akainu, where his whole life he was like powerless. There was really nothing he could do growing up in a land of pirates, and then he obtained the magma fruit at a young age, or maybe when he was like a teenager, maybe like in his early 20s or something, and he's like, this is the solution. This is the fruit that has like some of the most maximum output of destructive physical power in this entire world. I'm going to eat this fruit and I'm going to become magma, which will burn all of this lawlessness down. And then he did. And then he had the magma powers, and then he just like, sunk his entire home island beneath the waves, turned it into like a volcanic hellscape, and then he left. And then he joined the Marines, and he worked hard in the Marines. He had a Logia, if he did have it at that point, and he rise to the top, and he now is at the top. He's the fleet admiral of the Marines, okay? And the entire way, he never tried to open his mind or his perspective to another angle like Aokiji did. He was always laser focused on that absolute justice. It's never changed until maybe now that he is the fleet admiral. Maybe that like you take a pry bar or something and you're trying to like finally like open his eyes a little bit to what the world really is and how corrupted the world government and the Gorosei really are. Maybe, just maybe, that might change his perspective on things. But don't expect any sort of like, I mean, there might be some sort of attempt at redemption like that Oda might do with Akainu. Maybe something similar to like what Horikoshi did with Endeavor in My Hero Academia. Both have fire powers, so I just immediately thought of that. And they both have scars on their face now. Interesting. But not some kind of redemption to the point where Akainu is going to, like, fight alongside the Straw Hats or something. Like, I don't see that happening. Or the only way that could possibly occur is, like, if Rox comes back. So it's like the Straw Hats have to help fight against Rox. The Marines have to help fight against Rox. But it's not like Akainu wants to do that, right? And he might still adopt the kind of philosophy of, like, okay, even if I admit the Straw Hats are not criminals in that way, they're only criminals because of the world government, I still can't go along with that. It's just he's too far gone kind of deal, but that's really going to be up to Oda and how he writes his character and all that. We haven't really gotten a tremendous amount with Akainu since the time skip. He showed up during the act break between acts 2 and 3 of Wano to discuss Sengoku, like Wano and Odin and everybody. But we've never really had a moment with Akainu where, he's starting to be like, is my way of looking at the world, is it wrong? Maybe I should change, You really don't get anything like that, and you don't get any sense of, like, guilt or remorse from all the shit that he's done. But yeah, the keys to all this will be in his past, and it will be a very intense backstory. Might even be more intense than some of the Straw Hats. Like, you got Brook's backstory where his whole crew was wiped out by pirates. You got Robin's backstory, which is directly tied to Akainu's. You got a lot of really sad backstories in One Piece, but Akainu might really be up there. I think whatever Oda has in store, he's like, oh, he's bringing his A game, his S game to this one, right? Well, at any rate, Thanks for watching the video. Hope you guys all enjoyed. Thanks for watching. And yeah, Jason versus Godzilla. You know, if Jason can get inside of Godzilla, maybe we can do something here. Because Jason can regenerate too, Barry. I mean, I think Godzilla can, but whatever. You know, Jason's gonna be, he's fast too. When no one's, looking, he can just teleport all over the damn place. I'm just saying.